last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a washing student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. Their safety data hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would've made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urchin. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind to chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Best to place your bets on weaponizing the identity of every limp progressive claiming grassroots integrity. Policy is a slippery slope for all of its complexity, so flex your brave resistance with this Ilhan Omar NFT. Numbered one of 723. Each depicts her valiantly championing a bill before she lays it at a donor's feet. And she can throw her hands up in the air with AOC and say if only Nina Turner could have voted present too, that's why we need another seat. We need some more progressives we elect to only tweet, who live to serve humana and their label of elective slapped on every patient's gravest needs. And every station plays the theme that medical professionals agree on the effectiveness and safety of injections authorized for this emergency. And in purely unrelated news, the profits of the ones who manufacture vaccines just increased by nearly 36 billion with a fucking B. Sometimes it feels like we're the only ones that see. Sometimes it feels like all of us are lost at sea. And every time we think we see an island on the tip of the horizon, it turns out to be another measure making sure we're kept within the watchful eye of murderous authority. And so I guess my grift is crying for the future they denied us, where the people who would buy us are a mockable minority. And we are more than genomes under warranty. And we are more than serfs in constant quarantine. If I had a single breath left, I'd let the chorus scream. I'd announce our leaders claiming none for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me.
Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Wait, so if you don't trust the CIA or you don't trust like our institutions, then what do you trust? Wait, so if you don't trust the CIA or you don't trust like our institutions, then what do you trust?
The last track, I think I only blinked once. I skipped lunch. Blinked twice. Christ, shut your eyes. Now open wide. Fascists took the nation and inflation took a supersize. It's sad to say your teachers couldn't quite make the ends collide. But now you'll probably get to see them on the weekends doing Uber drives. See, lube it with a little oil. One, it tastes expensive too. You'd be surprised how well it helps you open up your throat so you consume the lie of human rights that was sold to you by suits and ties, designer scents on plastic men with patient fangs and ancient vice. You know, the kind of greed that makes a person lose the sight of morals, so it's easier to sleep at night. It's easier to ease their minds and pick a foreign people we could demonize. If you take a sec to sink into how war criminals think, you'll know you'd never want to see inside. If every man's an open book to look within, theirs are bound in human skin and not designed for human eyes. They are wearing human skin, but they can simply not be humanized. They aren't worth the lowest of the poor they swore to crucify. Holy sweet Geneva, there's a mass grave full of dead believers you called the police on cause you don't believe in squatters' rights. You believe the sanctity of human life is relative to human worth in terms of work and dollar signs. So listen when I say you need to find the light of day before it's too late to apologize. Like holy sweet Geneva, here's a mass grave you can colonize. Because you seem to love to talk about the spirit of America. But if you saw the spirit of this land's supposed character, I think that you'd be calling ICE. And I also think the actual America is truly represented by the call to ICE. Is represented best by the descendants of some immigrants bitching about the immigrants, snitching on some immigrants, then playing dumb and innocent like good little Christians when their neighbors get deported. Until they're screaming at the store that they waited 20 minutes more because the staff was short. Because some ordinary bigot started waging war on immigrants. And honey, we'll just keep deporting because like your first vote and each election since, it turned out that the man you are supporting ended up to just be twice the fucking bigot as the bigot that he wins against. But I was not among the herd. A single word from Biden stirred a tingle in the cynic's sense. I knew that a vote for Joe was more like Reagan 2.0. I I could smell that sarin smoke that choked around the river bend. And so I spoke about a living end, about an anchor thrown to drowning men, a democratic president, a country never found again. A man who marinated.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Hi everyone. I'm here. We're doing this. We're live. It's Tuesday night, so we're here for Indie News Now Live. And that's what we're going to do tonight. I got a bunch of crazy stories. I mean, every week, I'm like, how are we going to find enough stories, enough good stuff to pull for a show? And somehow we figure out a way. Thankfully, we know enough independent outlets and sources that we can rely on and trust, and we're gonna lean on some of the top ones tonight. And we're gonna tell you what's happening in the world of course, going on with Gaza and with sanctions over people who are trying to tell the truth about Gaza and about war. Okay, we've also got stuff going on about Epstein Island. I don't really want to talk about necessarily so that we can't do anything about, but there is really important information about stuff that people really don't know about. Like, for example, the other island that he had, or what was going on over at Zoro Ranch. And so we're going to bring an article that Dissent and Bloom spent hours and hours researching in order to grab. And there she is right there. Your computer is being slow. Well, we're not going to go slowly tonight. I can promise you. Good evening to everybody over on Substack. We're over live at IndieMediaToday.com. There is our friend Journo. What's going on, my brother? I showed before the Wall of Fame and everyone that has contributed to independent media. Really appreciate everybody doing that. If you don't have a couple bucks to drop, please share the stream somewhere. Share it on Facebook. Share it on Telegram. Share it on Twitter. Share it on Instagram. Share it on you name it, TikTok. I don't know how you would even do that. Maybe do a little clip of this and put it out on TikTok or share it on Notes on Substack. Also restack it. So that's probably it. A lot of people were watching the State of the Union. Did he poop his pants? I don't know. I wasn't watching, so I wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm guessing there was a poly market bet on whether he pooped his pants would be my guess. And now you can even embed that into your Substack post, because that's something new that they allowed with their deal with Polymarket, which is disgusting. So now you can incorporate Polymarket odds making into any post and any article. Gross. And I did not bring any that I believe did that tonight. So we're also going to talk about the planned military base for Gaza that I don't think enough people are talking about. We're also going to talk about the journalists that said they were tortured, that we're going to find out about tortured journalists, and so content warning on that. I didn't think that I was going to have a very long fuck ice segment, and then all of a sudden I had 3 stories to throw together, and that's what that's going to be. And then we'll have a quick lightning round. David Rovics got his YouTube channel back. Somalia keeps getting bombed. We'll talk about that. Nobody really understands what's happening other than to set up a narrative, but why? And then we'll do our GoFundMes. There were some updates for Shanda, who ended up going home, thankfully. And then Natalia, we are still waiting. Her last hearing was delayed. It was supposed to be Friday. We were hearing, I heard on Monday from Anthony that over the weekend it was delayed till Monday. I'm still waiting for any updates from Anthony on what's happening right now with her. So I guess we can get started. All right. We're gonna get right into what happened in Europe. Now, we've been covering, we've been covering what's been happening, sanctioning journalists, and with Europe sanctioning just individual citizens for their speech. Jacques Baud, who was the former Swiss intelligence colonel, not exactly somebody that we would necessarily want to be connected with, but he started speaking out against what's happening in Ukraine, and all of a sudden he found he couldn't travel. We covered that last year. Eva Bartlett talked about Jacques' story. there's been a couple of other ones, and now we see another one reported by Indie Media Award honoree Ali Abu Nima over at the Electronic Intifada. All right, EU sanctions German journalist in a shocking first over Gaza reporting. Now, here's what's going on. We actually covered this, and I'm going to show a little bit from when we had covered this, right? I had a video, yep, from when we covered this. So here's the story. EU sanctions a journalist, and Ali writes that in January he saw a post on Twitter that shocked him. As of now, this is Hussein Dogru, and I'm not sure if anyone would really remember that name, but he said, I can't provide food for my family, including 2 newborns due to EU sanctions. He has zero access to any money. And we talked about this with Francesca Albanese as well. And this is along a similar vein, but Dogru is a journalist, a German citizen living in Berlin. After reading his post, Ali sent him a private message offering to order groceries and have them sent to his home. But the reply shocked him even more. Similar to Albanese, unfortunately, I'm not even allowed to accept any financial or material support. He is the first European citizen known to be living inside the EU to face extrajudicial sanctions imposed by Brussels, robbing him of fundamental civil and humanitarian rights. For sure. He can't travel also. He's the first person to be sanctioned specifically for his reporting related to Palestine. He said, I'm not allowed to exist anymore. And that's the headline right there. I'm not allowed to exist anymore. I'm not allowed to provide my children with basic necessities, he explained on the EI podcast. I can't pay my rent. I can't pay my lawyers. And yes, I'm not even allowed to accept any kind of food, water, or medicine whatsoever from third parties. So you're just supposed to starve and die, I guess? Technically, that even includes his own wife. This was the same story we heard with Francesca Albanese. Now, he was born in Germany and raised there all his life. Here's how we knew about him before. He was the founder of Red, an independent publication that extensively covered protests in Germany against Israel's genocide in Gaza. He's unlikely to be the last person to face this new form of excommunication, with the German government now openly threatening journalists that they could be next if they stray too far from the official line. Okay, that's a mess. All right, this is a guy who basically said that. I'm not even going to play his video because it's in German. The sanctions block all of his property and ban him from traveling. So you think you own stuff? Guess what? It doesn't matter. In theory, they allow him to withdraw $600 a month from his own account. But in practice, his bank has repeatedly even blocked that. Unreal. In any case, $600 doesn't go very far in an expensive city like Berlin, or even in an inexpensive city anywhere. Dogru and his family have had to cut back severely to try to survive. And he could face harsh punishment for accepting assistance from anyone. Up to 5 years in prison for anyone who violates the sanctions against him. So how could any of this be happening? In May of last year, the EU adopted its 17th package of sanctions supposedly targeting Russia. But of course, those sanctions and more that followed weren't just aimed at only Russian entities and individuals. Brussels also began targeting, apparently for the first time, EU and other European citizens. Now, Ali says what is particularly shocking is that these individuals were sanctioned simply for speech, journalism, or views disagreeing with the foreign policies of their governments, NATO, and the European Union. That's specifically about Jacques Bond. They include Xavier Moreau, a former French military officer and Moscow-based founder of Stratpol, which is a website critical of NATO and the French government. And of course, German citizens Alina Lipp and Thomas Roper sanctioned for their reporting from Russia. Again, these are people who specifically reported on or about Russia. And as I mentioned before, in December, the EU also sanctioned Jacques Baud, who was the Swiss Army colonel, an intel analyst, well known, all right, in independent media for analysis of NATO and Western strategy in the context of the war in Ukraine. But he's critical of it. So he lives in Brussels, but because of the sanctions, he can't travel back home to Switzerland, which isn't even a member of the EU, which is weird. So if he could get to Switzerland, I guess he would be safe. Technically, maybe. I don't know. According to Patrick Baab, not Baal, but Baab, who recently visited him in the Belgian capital, Baud survives off a few $100s he's allowed to withdraw from his bank account under sanctions, and the neighbors are cooking for him. Baud, like Dogru, is fighting back. As what else are you going to do? Just lay down and take it? Run away and leave everything you own and everything you worked for your entire life? Or stand there and fight? And yeah, you might lose it, but you're guaranteed to lose it if you leave. The EU has also sanctioned Natalie Yam, a Swiss Cameroonian and anti-colonial scholar. She's described the devastating impact of the sanctions, even though she doesn't live in or travel to Europe. She's unable to pay for rent or medicine and can't return to Switzerland again because the sanctions ban flying over EU territory. Literally, they're banned from going over the airspace of an EU territory. That's insane. And she, too, is fighting back in court. But we know how that's likely going to end up going. Right? As well as being the first EU sanctioned citizen to be sanctioned while living on EU territory, Dogru is unique in another precedent-setting manner because he was sanctioned under blanket accusations of supposedly spreading what the EU considers pro-Russian disinformation. But what is that? The only one to be sanctioned so far for reporting related to Palestine as well, particularly Israel's crimes in the context of the ongoing genocide, right? So here's Dogru saying, the EU Council rejected my lawyer's application to reconsider the sanctions imposed. The evidence is shocking and dangerous, which forces me now to publish the entire evidence used to sanction me. The EU forbids me from publishing their evidence dossier. And there's a long thread behind that. That was back in September. And we covered that his publication, Red, was also subjected to EU sanctions. Even though they were never funded by Russia, they never touched Russia, they never had anything to do with Russia. In order to justify targeting Red, the EU claims that the publication systematically spread false information subjects with the intent of creating ethnic, political, and religious discord amongst its predominantly German target audience, including by disseminating the narratives of radical Islamic terrorist groups such as Hamas. Now they're saying he's Hamas, or spreading Hamas propaganda. This is the same shit they're actually charging Richard Medhurst with in Austria, or in, right, I think it's Austria. It's not difficult to imagine how such a vague and broad claim, reminiscent of Israel's accusations that any critic is a Hamas supporter, could be used to muzzle any publication that debunks official narratives. Of course, that's the plan. The sanctions on Red proved to be unnecessary because it was effectively forced to close down before the measures even took effect. That was last May, and it was at the same time that BitChute had decided to exit Europe, the UK, because of additional reporting measures and potentially being sanctioned under what was that? The Terrorism Law 12. So this came after what the publication called a coordinated campaign of bogus and even criminal accusations leveled by an unholy alliance of German media outlets, journalists, union representatives, and NGOs, some of which were even founded or directly financed by the German and Israeli state. Also by the United States. I specifically remember him, and not him, but Red Media being called out by Antony Blinken alongside Africa Stream. And both of those ended up shutting down. These personal sanctions are adopted by EU foreign ministers without any judicial process or opportunity for these targeted to defend themselves, and are binding on all member states. How is that? Unilateral sanctions against an individual with no defense or appeal? Or the appeal, again, they're not even allowed to be there. Their lawyer has to be there, apparently in order to deprive him of any legal rights that he would enjoy as an EU citizen. The EU sanctions decision identifies him only as a Turkish citizen, even though he is, in fact, only a German citizen and not a Turkish national. That's weird. Germany and the EU appear to be denying his German citizenship purely based on his ethnicity. Convenient for them, and a horrifying echo of how a past German government treated its Jewish citizens years before it decided to exterminate them. The message to millions of Europeans with ancestry in former European colonies could not be clearer. So they're basically erasing his entire German heritage because he's speaking out against Israel. They stripped him of his citizenship. All right? Even though he is a German citizen. And has that been announced? I don't know. It says they appear to be denying his citizenship. But I have not seen that, although he's challenging the sanctions in EU courts, a lengthy and expensive process that could take years, offering him and his family no immediate relief. They just want them to starve and die. It's like the Israelis are trying to extend Gaza to the journalists that fought on their behalf. Oh, you wanted to fight for them? Well, now you can actually live like we're treating them. No, we want you to stop treating them and everybody else like that, asshole. Not to treat everybody else like you treat them. Because it's not cool. Because it's disgraceful. Because it's against every law that we have in every other country. The fact that he hasn't been charged with any crime and hasn't been given any legal due process appears to be precisely the point of the sanctions. How do you appeal when you've never actually been charged? What are you appealing? The EU itself asserts that sanctions are not punitive and instead seek to bring about a change in the policy or conduct of those targeted. Behavior, yes, with a view to promoting the objectives of the EU's common foreign and security policy. You better not speak out against the one word of the government. Holy shit, you might as well just say it. Brussels also admits that by sanctioning people like Dogru for publishing news and opinions the EU would prefer to suppress, it is targeting them for non-illegal behavior. Well, who's going to stop them? In other words, the EU is depriving his young children of fundamental rights and needs until their father falls in line with its policies. A personalized version of Western sanctions wars waged on entire populations in Cuba, Venezuela, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, or Iran. Dogru, however, is adamant that this will not succeed, and I hope not. The only way to fight is to do exactly the opposite of what they want me to do. I'm never going to promote the European security and foreign policy, so therefore I'm going to fight that. Despite closure of Red, he still continues to speak out publicly on Twitter and on Instagram and on YouTube. He also still runs the Red Stream Net account on Twitter. And his work includes a documentary on Palestinian resistance to Israeli colonization, apartheid, and settler terror, filmed in the occupied West Bank in 2022. For him, it is no coincidence that he, with this particular focus on Palestine and the genocide in Gaza, is the first EU citizen to be sanctioned on EU soil. And we've seen other people sanctioned. They're testing it with him because they're shutting down Palestinian voices, or pro-Palestinian voices is right now the quote-unquote most acceptable, at least when it comes to governing bodies. And once they achieve that and set their little precedent, they'll come after all non-pro-Palestinian voices as well. We are all fucking Julian Assange. And I find it sad that Ali and the EI and everybody seems to decline mentioning Julian's name and Julian's story and Julian's struggle, because his struggle is all of our struggle. And it was all of our struggle. Thankfully, he's out of prison, but he had to give up admitting that he did journalism and that he traded in classified material, which again is the job of a journalist if you do it the right way. Also that it's a whole mess, but he had to admit to a crime, which was a mess. Really sad. So yes, so again, what we're seeing here, Hussein Dogru is basically an extension of what they did to Julian Assange for inconvenient speech, where they put him in a hole, they charged him, and then they would appeal that charge, and then they would, uphold the appeal, and there would be another appeal, and they would just drag it out while he suffered and his family suffered without him. This is what they're now doing to Hussein Dogru for reporting on Red Stream and doing the same kind of reporting. It really sucks. All right. Again, that Ali Abu Nima is a member of the 2024 class of Indie Media Award honorees. I have a page set up dedicated to Ali and his specific links: Blue Sky, Muckrack, Twitter, Instagram. So you can follow him there at indiemediaawards.substack.com. But also the Electronic Intifada is a class of 2024 outlet for independent media, because they have been doing independent journalism for years and do a phenomenal job of it. Do the best they can to get it right, to amplify Palestinian voices specifically. And I appreciate them for it. Again, Twitter, Blue Sky, all the different properties where they broadcast and where they share their content. We have Ali and we have Asa Winstanley, who's a contributor there. There's also Nora Barrows Friedman and John Elmer that run the podcast and the live stream. Great outlet, great people. Really appreciate the work that they put in and the time that they put in. Again, I wanted to mention for a second that back in, and let's see when this was, 8 months ago, June of 2025, we did a segment in the lightning round on How Did We Miss That? About Red Media closing. And I read the Dogru thread about what was happening and the letter that was published about why they were unable to continue. And again, notice that it's an Istanbul-based media which could no longer operate. All right, the current campaign against Red Media is a troubling strategy, and this was set up in May. So if you were paying attention, and hopefully you were, you would notice that now we're looking at 9 months later that now these guys are prosecuting the founder. The German government is now coming after the founder of Red Media personally to sanction him and make sure that he can't feed his family. Right? The campaign aims to intimidate, criminalize, and ultimately silence Red Media through lawsuits and media repression, with the calculation of forcing a criminal conviction through fabricated allegations and media pressure. So that's why he shut it down in the first place. But they didn't stop there. They continued to prosecute and persecute Dogru. Journalism isn't a crime, folks. Look at that right along the bottom. Hashtag journalism is not a crime. And we believe that. And we believe that the truth tellers, the people that have been trying to get the facts about what's actually happening out there correct and put that out for all to see, those are the ones that end up suffering. And it's a damn shame to do that. And we're going to continue to amplify their voices. Thank you, Talking Wombat over on Substack. I love Ali and his team. Great people. All right. No, the State of the Union. No, I'm not going to poop my pants. That only happens over in Trump world. Welcome to everybody over on Elena the Red. Zionism wants all opponents just to cease existing. Unfortunately, yes, and they're orchestrating narratives and figuring out ways to lock up dissidents, to tie them up in court, to cancel them from their jobs, from being able to publish by smearing them as anti-Semitic or using hate speech or domestic terrorism or any number of methods that we've seen employed. And this is what we're trying to warn everybody about in a way. But look, we can't stop speaking out. We can't let this stop us. If anything, we've got to have this empower us even more and embolden us, because hopefully they won't be able to stop us all. And that, I get that that's what the point of the surveillance state and mass surveillance and AI to a point will be listening for certain keywords or whatever it is. But we've got to figure out a way to stand up en masse, work together, and fight what's happening. Because there are journalists that are locked up right now in ICE detention facilities because of what they were reporting. There are journalists that can't travel right now, that are being hassled in airports whenever they go from country to country because of what they're reporting. Journalism is not a crime. Telling the truth and exposing the facts about inconvenient narratives to the powerful is not and should not be considered a crime. And as Yona put it, thought criming. Yes, brother. Thought criming is exactly what they're doing right now. All right. And so support independent media because we need it more than ever. The ways to do that are up there on that board. There's several different ways. If you want to leave tip immediately, the best way to do that is with Cash App or at ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Cash App is $ Indie News Network, INDIE. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. If you want to subscribe monthly, you can do that at patreon.com/Indie News Network. Then we've got INNnewsletter.com is a Substack newsletter I publish to weekly and have a couple of podcasts over there. And Indie Media Today is my podcast and my newsletter. That's where we're live right now for Indie News Now Live, and all the clips get published also as their own individual podcast and posts throughout the week. I also write original articles there. I share the weekly update from INN over to my Substack sometime throughout the weekend if I'm able to. So there's a reason to subscribe to both. And everybody up on that board already has supported financially somehow, and really appreciate everybody doing so. Also wanted to mention and give a plug that Indie News Now is also a website. You can go to IndieNewsNow.com. That is an aggregated website that pulls content from over 100 different sources, but also it streams live. It has links to all the podcasts from the network, and it also, you can get links, you get merch, and you can leave a tip using our direct Stripe link. Okay. Who are these people? Shane Muir, good to see you, sir. Live from down under. So now we've got people from all over the world watching, and that's freaking awesome. Over on Rumble over there. Okay. We're going to get into, I believe we're getting into our Fuck Israel segment. Am I right? Segment 2. Yeah, we're getting to Fuck Israel. That's what we're going to do. And it's not going to be a fun part. So trigger warning, if you're not down with the violence and what's happening there, and it's going to get you really upset, this is the time you might want to take about a half-hour break, because we're going to get into some stuff right here. So, first of all, again, electronic intifada. But this time we're going to get a report from somebody on the ground, not rely on Ali Abu Nima in this case. Claire, how are you? Good to see you as well. Thanks for joining the stream live. Appreciate that. The strict and chaotic order of displacement. And this is going to be heartbreaking because we're going to hear from somebody who's had to deal directly with the repercussions of exactly what Israel wants to inflict really on all of us, which is displacement, which is you're kicked out of your homes, you're scrambling for your lives, you have all of your life, belongings in one bag, and you're constantly running for your life to figure out a new place to shelter. That's what they want really for anybody that opposes what their vision is, which is sad. That's a picture in Khan Yunis. This person says, when I wake up at dawn, I don't wake to the beautiful sound of the Adhan. Israel has destroyed nearly all the mosques in Gaza, and I can barely hear the Adhan or the call to prayer anymore. Instead, I wake up in my family's tent in Al-Mawasi, Khan Yunis, to the horns of the water truck. It's not the only water truck that comes during the day, but I prefer to catch the early truck rather than fight the long lines later in the day. These horns are my wake-up call, my chance to get drinking water relatively smoothly. The truck stops nearly 150 meters from our tent, which is situated on a barren piece of land packed with tents, about half a mile from the beach. A few palm trees are scattered nearby, 2 of which are headless. I'm lucky if the moon is still up in the sky to light the road when I begin my walk. Otherwise, I walk in the dark, following the beams of others' flashlights, since my hands are occupied carrying water jugs. There's beauty in suffering, however. Dawn is my favorite time to look at the stars. I like how Orion accompanies me on my way to the truck and Sirius on my way back to the tent. And while this is how I start my day, the rest of it can be unpredictable in terms of timing. No matter what the situation is in Gaza, we keep moving. We keep walking, running, and spinning around the probable remnants of life. Since the beginning of the genocide, we haven't had not even emotionally. Taking some rest in Gaza means losing something essential for life. A nap means I might not get drinking water, or I might miss the tuk-tuk that roams the camps with bread from aid agencies and end up hungry. Even putting on headphones for a minute could lead to the loss of a necessity of life. We live in a state of organized chaos that requires alertness. We're dropping streams. Okay, I guess we're back. I think we're back. I hope we're back. Hi, everybody. Funny that we're dropping streams right when I talk about displacement. Our stream just got displaced. My brothers, aged 18, all have been displaced from our home, which is now destroyed in Sheikh Nasser neighborhood east of Khan Yunis since May of 2025. Okay, our tent is about 4 by 5 meters. I think we're back. Wombat. Uh-oh is right. Yeah, or we dropped for a second there. I know. Go Start, how are you? Good to see you over on Rumble. I'm letting everybody get back on. I think they are. I'm going to continue this awful story, reading a Palestinian story about his life in displacement. To the east is Al-Aqsa roundabout, and to the north is An-Nus roundabout, about a 5-minute walk to either. My life as a displaced person follows its own strict, though chaotic order. It's an order and a routine that doesn't necessarily submit to time, because it may take forever. In Gaza, we don't follow the clock. We follow certain stages of the day: fetching fresh water, chopping wood, making fire, haggling with vendors in the market, filling the small tank with washing water, and preparing something to eat. it's very much more communal and collective because it has to be. They have to do this to survive. While the beginning and end of his day remain routine, the chores in between are not. Some days he'll be working on his laptop, either tutoring in the sciences and Arabic or writing, and then he'll hear shouts outside the tent. The washing water is running through the pipes that run through the camp. I drop everything and run out to fill the tanks with water. Separate from the drinking water trucks is the water that's supplied to the camps for washing and other tasks. Remember, they have no plumbing. There's no electricity. They're like living in rubble. This water comes from a few groundwater wells in the area of Al-Mawasi that are still powered by solar panels because, again, there's no electricity. As long as they don't have electric plants, they have electricity through solar, through hydro. All right. As long as the sun is up, we'll get water. Yet even a few clouds or a dusty sky that blots out the sun, as is normal these days, will prevent the pumps from working. They need it working every minute it can. Aid organizations and other groups of people facilitate the pumping, and then the water is delivered via different taps and faucets. The water isn't pure, clean. It has a yellowish-green color, but they have no other option but to use it for cleaning and washing. His mother and sister also drop whatever they're doing and rush to do the dishes or wash the clothes. Brothers will hurry to make a fire to warm the water. But to make fire, they need chopped wood, and for that, they need to borrow their neighbor's axe. And when it's not available, they put two big rocks on the ground and place the wood horizontally on them, and they then throw the rock on it to literally break the wood into pieces. They can't even get an X in there. This is what Israel is doing to people, trying to turn them back into the Stone Ages. Although cooking gas is now available in Gaza, we only get 8 kilos of it every couple of months. We rely on wood to save gas. It makes sense. After months and months of Israeli-orchestrated famine, our energy is low, and we've survived at times on crumbs. Disgraceful. There's more food on the markets these days, but not the fresh food we had before the genocide, and certainly not nutritious food. Sodas, chocolates, and snacks can be found on shelves, but fresh vegetables are rare. A large amount of the food is frozen, and they're not accustomed to frozen chicken and meat. Also, they have nowhere to keep it frozen. Before, they had vegetables from their own farms in Gaza, not imported vegetables. Even though there is food in the markets, it doesn't taste like the food they used to eat. By the time Ramadan began a few days ago, Ramadan Kareem, okay, we were fully prepared to fast as we have accumulated much experience being hungry. Our energy will go to praying and worshiping over the next few weeks. I often get phone calls from my uncle during the day while working, telling me about a sale on sugar or oil or frozen chicken. And I stop working and head to the market. It's not that I'm cheap, but my family spent nearly all our savings during the famine, and we have to save all we have. My mother sold her wedding bracelet and one of her rings to buy us flour. It's heartbreaking. We try to keep a stockpile of food supplies on hand for the inevitable Israeli restrictions on food imports that could be imposed on us at any moment, or the bombings that they're planning on doing again, starting in March. We always fear and worry about living through famine again. It was the worst phase of the genocide, and the ghosts of those days still hover in our minds. I mean, people are permanently traumatized. There is always work to be done, and my brothers and I split up the tasks. At times, one will stop studying to fix the bathroom. Another will dig a hole in the ground to drain the dirty water and then bury the filled one. That's the bathroom. Sometimes I'll do repairs on the tent, like fixing the wooden frame that gets pushed inward from the many children playing near it. Overall, we always need to keep the tent ready for anything or any weather. Sea weather can be surprising. Something always comes up to change the course of my day. That's why I don't really plan out a routine, because the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say. I just try to be at a precise spot when the probability of having a quality of life suddenly emerges. We need to be prepared all the time to be everywhere, all at once. Because we don't know when that opportunity will come. When I have lunch, I know it's the end of my day. You see, cooking on fire takes time because fire needs our full attention, which is near impossible when we live in these conditions, and the wind can be tricky sometimes. They live close to the water. The only habit I still have from my life before the genocide is that I still love the night sky. It's the only thing that Israel could not reach and ruin. They're certainly going to try. Watch. Maybe the only benefit I get from not having electricity for more than 2 years is that there is less light pollution. The stars look clearer to my naked eye now, and I love looking at the stars. I look at the stars when I'm angry at everything, when I'm bored of everything, when I'm tired of everything, when I just can't take it anymore. Besides misery, stars are the only constant thing in my life. I go to sleep because I know that even if I'm starting my new day with the same hard work, I will still have the chance to look at the stars again. That's just, I'm sorry to be depressing and heartbreaking but this is what our government, this is what all the Western governments are doing collectively to everybody. What a disgrace. Fuck Israel. Next, we move on to another Indie Media Award honoree, Kevin Gosztola, from his publication, The Dissenter. Originally, he did it under Shadowproof, and then Proof, and Kevin started his own newsletter over on Ghost, The Dissenter. He also is on Substack. He wrote this article, and he's reporting on 59 Palestinian journalists that shared their stories of torture and abuse at the hands of the IDF. So this is a screenshot from a CNN report on State Haman. All right, fair use as it's included for the purpose of news and commentary. Now, I'm going to read this real quick. A report from the CPJ features testimonies from Palestinian journalists who were detained and tortured by Israeli security forces. Israeli forces detained, quote, at least 94 Palestinian journalists and one media worker in that period, 32 journalists and one media worker from Gaza, 60 from the West Bank, and 2 in Israel. 30 remain in custody still as of February 19th this year. Their 2025 prison census found that Israel had been listed as a top jailer of journalists since the 2023. They're also the top murderer of journalists since 2023. The figure of 94 journalists is lower than the number shared by the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate, which previously reported that 153 journalists were detained between October 2023 and October 2025. Crucially, the Press Freedom Organization collected 59 interviews with journalists, and there's a link to them here, a full PDF, that were subject to torture, abuse, and other forms of violence since the Israeli military carried out a genocide against Gaza beginning on October 8th, 2023. It didn't begin on October 7th, we know, but that was when this genocide really began. CPJ Regional Director Sarah Kuda said that the report exposes a deliberate strategy to intimidate and silence journalists and destroy their ability to bear witness. Sound familiar? Getting back to the story I spoke about before with the Red Stream guy who's now being sanctioned to the point that he can't feed his twins? The continued silence from the international community only enables this. 10 journalists requested anonymity. Totally understand as I'm speaking anonymously here, alleging explicit threats of rearrest or death from Israeli interrogators and prison service officials if they spoke publicly. These threats appear in 31 of the individual testimonies and have driven many journalists away from their work. Several journalists described torture that they survived at State Haven, a military detention camp that was the focus of widespread media attention in 2024 after Israeli whistleblowers at the camp spoke to CNN. Right at the time, Israeli journalist Guy Peleg reported on the torture, which included sexual assaults, and he subsequently faced threats of imprisonment. And that was sexual assaults against men and women, by the way. We returned from hell, one journalist said, using the term other detainees used for a section at State Haven. They literally call a section hell. And I remember they brought the flotilla people there too. Gaza photojournalist Shadi Abu Sido told CPJ that he was shackled, blindfolded, and forced through a corridor of soldiers who beat him with batons and kicks. He later learned that he had a broken rib. Another journalist, Osama al-Sayed, and I think we read this one before, and again, trigger warning, said that he and other detainees were stripped naked and attacked by trained dogs in State Haven. He described the incident as rape, adding that the soldiers laughed while filming the assault, that they trained the dogs to rape the human beings. Also at State Haven, journalists were subjected to prolonged exposure to high-volume sound, including continuous amplified music, resulting in both sleep deprivation and sensory disorientation. They used round-the-clock dog barking to torment detainees and torture them. But most moral army in the world, right, folks? The New York Times previously reported that detainees at State Haven were classified as unlawful combatants under legislation that the Israeli government adopted. Because they decided to, because they fucking made it up. Fuck Israel. A person could be detained for 75 days, quote, without judicial permission, and denied access to a lawyer for up to 90. Their location could be hidden from rights groups like the International Red Cross. The two Palestinian journalists that CPJ spoke to reported that they were sexually assaulted. Freelance journalist Sami al-Sa'i described how he was taken to a small cell in Megiddo prison and soldiers removed his trousers and underwear and penetrated him with batons and other objects. In total, according to the report, CPJ documented 17 journalist testimonies involving sexual violence, and 19 more describing humiliating strip searches. They did that to Greta. The alleged acts included assaults on the journalist's genitals, attempted forced penetration with objects, forced nudity in recording, threats of rape, and other methods of sexualized coercion. Again, permanently traumatizing these people. And other because this is what you do to people when you are in the right and when you've done the right thing, right? To stop them from speaking out against what you're doing when you're right, right? Of course not. This is disgraceful. At other detention facilities, 11 journalists said Israeli soldiers subjected to them to strappado or ghost hanging. They were hung, suspended by their arms, bound by the back, then pulled upwards, or in some cases, oh my God, they were made to kneel or lay face forward for hours, as well as restrained under rain or direct sun and sewage water. the Israelis are afraid that anybody that's ever let out would do this to them because they've already done this to people. And that they're so depraved and sick in the way that they think that others would do the same to them in revenge. So they have to make sure they never do that. How do you do that? Starvation, which the Israeli military has of course used as a method of warfare against Gaza, was inflicted upon detained journalists as well. 55 of the 59 journalists interviewed reported extreme hunger or malnutrition, with an average weight loss of 54 pounds. Israeli soldiers, according to Al-Said, called him Jazeera. He was beaten up gravely after he revealed to soldiers that he was a journalist. Abu Sido said a soldier told him, "You'll learn the meaning of journalism in Tel Aviv," after he was detained while filming. Journalist Amin Baraka, who worked for Al Jazeera, recounted, quote, "An Israeli soldier told me, word for word in Arabic, that Al Jazeera correspondent Wael al-Dadu defied us and stayed in the Gaza Strip, so we killed his family, and we will kill yours too." Indie Media Award honoree Wael al-Dadu, by the way. The Israeli government has waged a war against any individual affiliated with Al Jazeera, banning the Arabic news network and bombing them in Gaza. In 2025, Reporters Without Borders found that the Israeli military was responsible for nearly half all journalist deaths worldwide. Military forces specifically targeted 29 media professionals, making the Israeli army, quote, "the worst enemy of journalists in the world." Of the truth, yes. As of CPJ's report, at least 30 Palestinian journalists remain in Israeli detention, continuously being tortured, starved. 25 of them have not been charged with any offenses because nobody's stopping Israel from doing it and nobody's forcing them to charge anybody with anything. And it's just freaking heartbreaking, man. All right. Again, that's our friend Kevin Gostola. There was a Kevin Gostola page. Oh, I guess I did it twice. Here we go. Here's the Kevin Gostola page. He's an initial class honoree 2022. IndieMediaAwards.substack.com. You can go to the journalist list or you can go to the class of 2022 list and you'll find Kevin there. And links to The Dissenter, okay, as well as the old podcast he did with Rania Kalik, who's also an Indie Media Award honoree now on Substack. And then we've got him over on Twitter and Blue Sky, Instagram, etc., etc. I think he might be on Upscroll, but I'm not 100% sure. But thank you, Kevin, for that report, which was horrifying. And you can, again, I'll link all of this in the Substack afterwards. We were dropping frames again. Oh, man. Okay. Oh, man. Okay, so now we're back to dropping frames. We did have a big snowstorm and we're supposed to have bad weather, so it's possible that is contributing to what's going on here. All right. Next on the Fuck Israel lineup, we've got another Indie Media Award honoree, Andy Worthington. Andy originally popped on our radar because of the closed Guantanamo work that he'd done in leading the charge and being one of the leading protesters in the UK about closing the Guantanamo Bay prison and freeing the people that are there still. I think there are still 19 being held. But he publishes a newsletter over on Substack that then links to his website, which has longer form versions of the articles that are published here. So here's like a short recap of some of the things that he was writing about. I wanted to bring this and showcase because he talks about the Board of Peace, which is, of course, what Trump is now doing in putting $10 billion of our money into this thing, appointing himself the permanent head of it forever. I guess, whatever. All right. He says that the Board of Peace met this week, expanding its sickening regeneration plans for Gaza. And that's why I wanted to bring this, was because of the word regeneration. All right, you've got this photo here of Kushner and Rubio and J.D. Vance and a bunch of ghouls behind him. All right, and those are some of the other images in the article. So that's a screenshot from a video of the first meeting of the Board of Peace, dominated in the front row by Trump and his close associates. He said, my new article on my website, Trump's Board of Peace meets, promotes its dystopian vision for Gaza's regeneration as Hamas's disarmament still eludes everyone. Okay, I hope you'll have the time to read that, is my detailed report about the inaugural meeting of that Board of Peace in D.C. last week, the day after Ramadan began, when Palestinians of the Gaza Strip sought to bring their devastated homeland back to joyful life with lanterns, lights, and celebrations. The meeting of Trump's would-be alternative to the UN, whose newly recruited members include autocrats, those seeking to curry favor with Trump, and Gulf and Muslim countries determined to maintain influence, quote-unquote, peace process, was notable for its absence of Western members and for its expansion of the vile, heartless, and profit-obsessed techno-futuristic plans for a new Gaza that Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, unveiled at Davos last month, dressed up as an unparalleled opportunity for peace and stability. And again, we've talked about how this has been a plan in place for years that predates even the Trump administration that we were reporting on in 2024. Of particular concern, let me make this a little bigger, was the revelation that the entire plan had originated in the earliest days of Israel's genocide in Gaza by Yakir Gabay, an Israeli Cypriot, meaning from Cyprus, real estate billionaire who, with the help of his good friend Kushner, had then sought out similarly minded opportunists to make his grotesque plan a reality. Also deeply troubling was a presentation by the former Israeli intelligence official Liam Tankman for the development in Gaza of a cashless society of total digital control, from which, of course, as I describe it, anyone regarded as unwanted for whatever reason could be completely cut off from all economic activity. A scenario of blackmail and pacification. Again, tell me how that's any different from what's happening to the sanctions on that guy over in Europe, in Germany. As described by the Palestinian political analyst Mohammed Shahada, and one that the numerous governments worldwide will be keeping a close eye on as they seek to replicate it in their own populations. They're all salivating at the opportunity to do this. While Israel's voracious hunger to resume its genocide is still largely being kept at bay, it continues to push against the rosy visions of the billionaire developers. But all their hopes require the disarmament of Hamas and other Palestinian factions, which Israel has failed to achieve and which Hamas itself has wisely refused to contemplate, offering only to hand over political control and its weapons to a Palestinian body empowered to establish autonomy. In other words, the Palestinian Technocratic Committee that is part of the peace process, but which everyone involved wants to keep sidelined. All right. As I explained, however, no other solution can bring the peace that all parties claim to want, and any alternative course of action will only expose the truth behind their masks. On the one hand, on Israel's part, the most grotesque enthusiasm for genocide that any of us have seen in our lifetimes. And on the other, the repulsive greed of the Western investors who only ever see the world through the prism of dollar signs. That is fucking poetry right there. AndyWorthington.substack.com. That's where I'm finding all of this. So he puts out something on Francesca Albanese and the Epstein files, which I also wanted to comment on because we're also going to get into Epstein in a bit. If you're on Facebook, 2 recent posts of Andy's had been recently popular, which is nice because he's usually shadow banned to shit, both dealing with UN responses to 2 particular scandals. Firstly, cynical efforts by Israeli representatives to undermine Francesca Albanese through a doctored video, which we covered on this show last week. And secondly, the condemnation of the revelations in the Epstein files as possibly meeting the legal threshold of crimes against humanity. Does it? Of course it does. Also this week, he remembered the release 2 years ago of Warriors, which was the song that he wrote about Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, as Julian was at that time still fighting his planned extradition to the U.S. You can listen to that on Bandcamp as he recorded his with the Forefathers, is the Forefathers, because there's 4 dads that are in the band. Okay. The cover of Warriors was his song. Please also note that if you want to read more about his work on Israel's genocide in Gaza, you can find his entire archive of 76 detailed articles written since October 7th, 2023, on his regular website, randyworthington.co.uk. I also wanted to mention that he had this memory about Julian 2 years ago. I remember that 2 years ago we were covering Day X, which was a 2-day trial at the Royal Courts of London that we live streamed the coverage daily on INN, and Reef and I were up all night long streaming it and getting interviews with Richard Medhurst and Matt Kennard and Juan Passarelli and others that were on site. It was a spectacle. I remember Amber King from Roar Media also went over there. Russell Dobular from Due Dissidence flew over there and was on site covering it live. It was an event. And I think it actually really did have an impact in helping to get him freed at some point in June of 2024. So Andy also recently marked his first anniversary on Substack. So please subscribe for just $8 a month or $80 a year, $2 a week. You could also make a one-off donation on PayPal or Stripe there. He just established a donation page. Support independent media. I'm a massive fan of Andy Worthington. Again, these are the kind of people that don't get the kind of recognition that they absolutely should, which is why Andy is an Indie Media Award honoree from class of 2024. Okay? Author of the Guantanamo Files, freelance investigative journalist, the best of us, Andy, out there protesting in the rain, fighting for the Guantanamo 19 still. CloseGuantanamo.org is one of his websites. Also at andyworthington.co.uk, which I'll have to add to this webpage. All right, but I originally put him on here for his work with Close Guantanamo, and he was nominated in 2024, and we're honored that, he shares our stuff and that we even made a connection with him. I think that's incredibly cool, and everyone should follow him at Andy Worthington over on Twitter. I don't think he's there much. He's mostly over on Substack and over on Facebook. So go follow him over on Facebook. Got a couple more in our Fuck Israel segment, unfortunately. This one is really fuck the United States. All right, I'm going to Indie Media Award honoree Dave DeCamp over at antiwar.com. And we're going to have to hit it one more time. Again, we're going to the best of the best here. These are vetted outlets and vetted journalists that over time have proven themselves to be most on point frequently. Dave DeCamp reports earlier this week on February 19th, 5 days ago, the U.S. plans to build a 5,000-person military base in Gaza for an international force. Did you know about this? Had you heard about this? I hadn't. The Trump admin is planning to build a 5,000-person military base inside Gaza, Guardian reported on Thursday, citing contracting records from the so-called Board of Peace. The report said that the base would take up more than 350 acres of land in southern Gaza and is envisioned as a future base for the international force that may deploy to the Strip under President Trump's plan for the Palestinian territory, though so far only Indonesia has announced plans to commit troops to the force. Fuck Indonesia for that. This is the Zaytun neighborhood. Look at all of those tents at this displacement camp. Look at them. They got like front doors and ventilation windows, and these are what people are using as their house now. This is where they live. The Guardian said that the plans it reviewed call for the phased construction of a military outpost that will eventually have a footprint of 1,400 meters by 1,100 meters, ringed by 26 trailer-mounted armored watchtowers, a small arms range, bunkers, and a warehouse for military equipment for operations. The entire base will, of course, be encircled with barbed wire. Yeah, fuck Kushner is right, Vicky. Unbelievable. All right. Santa Bloom, thank you. I get it. I'm glad you're watching on TV. That's cool. And have a good night. I appreciate you watching, sharing, and we're going to read one of your articles in a little bit about the second island that Jeffrey Epstein owned that nobody talks about. So the entire base, of course, is going to be encircled with barbed wire because why wouldn't it? The contracting document includes protocol for what happens if construction teams come across human remains. Since, of course, the bodies of at least 8,000 Palestinians are missing under rubble. Quote, if suspected human remains or cultural artifacts are discovered, all work in the immediate area must cease immediately. The area must be secured, and the contracting officer must be notified immediately for direction. Which means they're just going to dig it all up anyway, bulldoze it, and then clear it. Because heaven forbid a tourist afterwards found a finger or a bone or anything that might have anything to do with the remains of a Palestinian. That, I believe, is really the goal behind that, which is disgraceful. It's unclear how much the base would cost to build, but earlier reports suggested the U.S. was planning to construct a major military facility on the Gaza border at a cost of between $500 million and $600 million. Remember how much that pier they spent was that went nowhere that then ended up, I think that was $250 million just on the pier. But now they're going to build a massive base inside Gaza. Dude, that's going to be billions, in the multiple billions. Trump convened his first Board of Peace meeting in Washington last Thursday, which came as Israel continues to violate the ceasefire deal daily, killing more than 600 Palestinians in the Strip since it was signed. At the event, Trump pledged that the U.S. would contribute $10 billion to the board. But with who? With whose authorization? He just made it up. Under Trump's plan for Gaza, the international force is supposed to replace the IDF, which of course we know it won't, who continue to occupy more than 50% of the Strip. But if they replace them with a private militarized force that are exactly like the IDF, what's the difference? But of course, there's no timeline on when that would happen. And Israel is, of course, threatening to restart its full-scale genocidal war if Hamas doesn't disarm, which they're never going to do. They already got back all the hostages. They've met every term of this ceasefire, quote unquote, while they continue to be murdered daily. And still, Israel fights it daily because they never intended to honor any of it. And again, I wanted to shout out antiwar.com as an inaugural class 2022 honoree for outstanding journalism as an outlet overall. That includes Dave DeCamp and Kyle Anzalone, who both got individual awards. I also want to shout out to Connor Freeman as well as Scott Horton over there. Scott is like one of the founders. And you've got all their links here as well. And then our shout out to our friend over at Anti-War News, which is like the lighter side of anti-war. There's an Anti-War News account over on Substack, over on Twitter. That's a little different from Dave DeCamp, and it's not raw. I don't even know if they're libertarian. I think they're more lefties than than libertarian. But this, of course, is a project of the Libertarian Institute or the Ralph something Institute. But fantastic work all the time, really. And we're going to have a Dave DeCamp story later as well. And I've got one more Fuck Israel story, this one from the Palestine Chronicle. All right, and this one also broke my heart. 6,000 amputees in Gaza face impossible recovery amid Israeli war ultimatum. Now, Israel is not at war. They are committing a massacre. Nobody is fighting back. Hamas is not really fighting back. They are armed, but where are they? They're not actively shooting at Israelis unless the Israelis are in the Gaza Strip or somewhere they're not supposed to be. And yes, Dissent in Bloom, Board of Peace is very 1984-esque. Sometimes I feel like someone in the Trump regime read Orwell as a blueprint. That's right. All right. And Go Start saying Trump privatized genocide. How's that for your State of the Onion? Yep. Shane Muir, didn't these people watch the Poltergeist movie? Any building will be a ghost hangout. Potentially. Maybe. Colonialism as always. I'm sorry. Yes, that's terrible, Vicky. Cowboy Kitty, I'd like to know, please give me an update on what happened Monday if you're there and you can share an update for me so I can share that later on. Okay. Now, on top of this, like I said, Palestine Chronicle staff, 6,000 amputees, thousands permanently wounded, struggle to survive as Israel threatens renewed war unless Palestinian resistance disarms in 60 days. So just stand there while we shoot you the entire time without any defense whatsoever, even though it's been declared by the United Nations that armed resistance to an occupation is legal and justified. As we have the shirt at the shop and the merch store to prove when a people are occupied, resistance is justified. Around 6,000 Palestinians in Gaza live with amputations, a quarter of them children. That's 1,500 to do the math. I think there's even more than that. Testimonies describe lifelong physical pain, trauma, and social isolation under siege conditions. And we read what it was like under displacement from the person who reported it earlier. Israel warns that it may resume the war if resistance groups refuse to surrender weapons within 60 days. Bullshit. Inside a Gaza hospital ward, Aida al-Baba watches her son Rajab relearn how to exist in a body reshaped by war. His fear began with the sound of bombing, but his life changed forever. And are we back? Are we back? Let's see if we're back. Please let us be back. Come on, let's be back. Bring us back. Let's get back. Hopefully we're back. The attack killed relatives and buried him beneath rubble. Doctors amputated his right leg. They treated a skull fracture and removed shrapnel from the other limb. After 3 days in a coma, he woke into a different struggle, one that did not end with survival. He cried from pain after repeated surgeries and now refuses to let others see his injury, asking his mother to cover his leg. Months later, malnutrition caused a fracture while he tried to walk on crutches. He watches other children play and then he turns away silently. He's among the thousands. Gaza's health ministry says nearly 6,000 amputations have been recorded since the war began, about 25% involving children. Most require long-term rehabilitation, which of course is unavailable under siege conditions. On a damaged road in northern Gaza, 33-year-old Hamza Salem pushes a worn manual wheelchair across rubble. Before the war, he worked at a fuel station in Jabalia refugee camp. First, a strike amputated his 7-year-old daughter's hand. Months later, another attack during displacement to Rafah amputated both his legs. Leaving the hospital didn't end the ordeal. with limited medicine and proper nutrition blocked from entering Gaza, his body weakened naturally. The wheelchair he received is unsuitable for the destroyed streets, and each trip to physiotherapy requires others to carry him across debris. I cannot move alone, he explains, describing a life measured in obstacles rather than distance. Health officials warn that the crisis extends beyond physical injury. Families face long-term psychological, social, and economic pressure when specialized care and prosthetics remain scarce. Authorities have urged international organizations to intervene urgently to provide rehab services and support. But, of course, we know that Doctors Without Borders and other relief aid organizations have been prevented from entering the Strip, or on a very limited basis. As Gaza struggles to cope with the human consequences of the massacre, Israeli officials warned the genocidal military campaign could resume. Again, Israel announced a 60-day ultimatum demanding that Hamas surrender all weapons, saying that failure to comply would lead to renewed bombing. The timeline may begin around the upcoming political meetings linked to the proposed international framework for Gaza's future governance. Palestinian factions reject the demand, saying that their arms are tied to resisting occupation rather than internal governance arrangements. The warning comes despite an existing ceasefire that ended the 2-year assault, which killed, of course, more than 72,000 Palestinians, and even the Israelis are accepting that number now, which we know is a gross undercount, and injured over 171,000 more, according to Gaza authorities. We know at least 8,000 are still missing or buried under rubble. Since the truce began, I can't believe they even used that word, alleged ceasefire, more like it, hundreds more Palestinians have been killed in continued violations. At least they announced that, but calling it a truce is a disgrace in itself. All right. And then for Gaza's amputees, the threat carries a clear meaning. Recovery may again be interrupted by another major massacre and bombing, and survival itself remains uncertain in a place where even healing has become part of the battlefield. Because fuck Israel. This is what they want. They want to make it so untenable that Palestinians either volunteer to leave or they die trying. That's why they're also now taking more of the West Bank, and we reported on that last week. This is extermination, and I don't care what anybody wants to call it. That is what the goal in the end game is here. Man, this is frustrating with the drop streams and the dropped frames. Thank you everybody for hanging with us while we're still here. Clearly, YouTube does not like us saying fuck Israel, because I just got another report that we lost another stream. What the hell, man? We're going to have to cobble this one together. All right, well, support independent media because we need it more than ever. Even my cable company or YouTube or somebody does not want this stream going out. The ways that you can support our Cash App, $, Indie News Network with the Cash App on your phone. ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Do that as friends and family. Patreon.com/Indie News Network is a monthly subscription, as is IndieMediaToday.com or INNNewsletter.com. You can give a one-time tip over at IndieNewsNow.com. Okay, and then also you can subscribe on Rumble to the channel. That little red subscribe button, or to gift a subscription. It's $4.99 for a monthly subscription on Rumble, and we get 97% of that money goes to the actual network. You could leave a super chat if you want to on YouTube. I appreciate any way that you want to help. The super chats, YouTube, of course, takes 30% of. If you leave a Rumble rant, Rumble takes 50%, and then we have to pay a processing fee on top of that. So I'm just letting you know how this all goes down for us. We'd like more money to be in our pocket of what you give us than less. So thank you to everybody who supports our channel and supports independent media and helps us operate and keep doing what we're doing. And we're going to keep doing this. So thank you again. All right. I've got a video first. And this is our Descent in Bloom segment here. She did some amazing work the last couple of weeks. Definitely go subscribe to her Substack, descentandbloom.substack.com. Just crossed 18,000 subscribers. He did some research about Epstein and Zoro Ranch, which I definitely want you to read, but I'm not going to talk about the Zoro Ranch story tonight. I'm going to show it a little bit, but she wrote another article about Great St. James, which everybody kind of is familiar with Little St. James, which is the island, you know, the Lolita Express that he flew to. Epstein Island is what they call it, right? But he actually owned a second island, and that's what she's going to talk about here, and then we will get to the article she wrote that accompanies this. So let's start with her video.
Did you know that Epstein had another island located right next to his first one? He bought it in 2016 for $22.5 million, 3 years before he died. Now, like most of his properties, this island was bought through a shell corporation, but this time it was because the residents of the island had begged the owners not to sell it to Epstein because they'd heard rumors of his illicit, to put it lightly, activities. Now, in order to conceal his identity, he had made Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem the beneficial owner against his will. Now, if you've read anything in the Epstein files, you know that this individual has been listed multiple times doing multiple abhorrent things to babies, people, just saying some of the most disgusting things I've ever read. It's only part of the island. He bought the rest through another LLC of his because that's what he liked to do. He liked to make shell corporations to buy things so that they wouldn't be directly linked to his name. Now, he was building a compound on this island, which is exactly what he had done with Zoro Ranch in New Mexico. The Daily News reported that they had planned to build a barge dock, 2 homes, cottages, an amphitheater, gardens, an underwater office and pool, storage building, security building, work shed, machine shop, solar array and generator, a marine electric cable. Like, he was planning a full-on compound where nothing could be accessed or really just super isolated, which makes sense when you think back to what happened with Zoro Ranch, where it is also alleged that there were 6 underground floors. This was the place that Epstein planned to have 20 women at a time to have his babies and pass on his superior genes because Epstein was obsessed with eugenics. Now, Little St. James and Great St. James were purchased by a billionaire named Stephen Deckoff. He bought both of the islands for $60 million, and he's planning on turning them into a luxury resort, although major construction has not yet been reported. Someone needs to look into Stephen Deckoff. It'll probably be me.
Yeah, she probably will, and I feel badly for Stephen Deckoff when she decides to do that. Again, descentandbloom.substack.com. We're going to read the article that she wrote about the other island. And this is crazy stuff. Everything you didn't know about Epstein's other island. An EPA visit, a rewritten will, a probate filing processed alongside his death. Great St. James might be one of the most overlooked pieces of the Epstein story. So she starts by saying that Jeffrey Epstein built his life around being unseen. Over the years, he acquired multiple remote properties, each more isolated than the last. Zoro Ranch sat on 10,000 acres, which again is 15 square miles of New Mexico desert. That's massive. Zoro was where Epstein planned to impregnate, as she said, 20 women at a time. And there's a link about that at Remove Paywalls from the New York Times. Little St. James was an island approachable only by boat or by air. Both allegedly had tunnels. Secret tunnel. Yeah, we've heard about tunnels before. The FBI never investigated Zoro Ranch, despite testimony from Annie Farmer, I thought it was Maria Farmer, and the FBI being given tips about buried bodies there. In the latest files drop, victims described being taken underground and abused on Little St. James, and emails with Jardian Design Group, a Virgin Islands construction firm, reference tunnels. And then you have Epstein files from the Justice Department there for more mentions of tunnels. Then, like she said, there's Great St. James, the property nobody mentions. Nobody wants to talk about the second island. Great Little St. James is the one that everyone knows, the one everyone that ends careers and fills hearing rooms. But Great St. James barely registers, and that needs to change. See, in her research, she found that the EPA had visited Great St. James less than 2 weeks before Epstein died. The only federal agency to ever go there. So while he was locked up, they sent people there. Who spent the money to do that? The Biden administration? This was likely one of the final dominoes to fall before they'd announced to the world that Jeffrey Epstein had turned up dead in his jail cell with the official camera footage cut and the guards that were supposed to be watching dead. It was a sign that the government was closing in on Epstein and he was worth more gone. And again, this is Great St. James. In the years before his arrest, Epstein was repeatedly cited and fined for building on Great St. James without proper permits. This is U.S. soil officially. And when you die with those kind of fees, the government can pay themselves with your assets. A $20 million island can auction off for much less than the court decides who in your family gets the rest. So at the time of his death, the Commissioner of Natural Resources for the Virgin Islands, Jean-Pierre Auriol, said they were over $1 million in unpaid potential penalties for violations that were still active when Epstein was arrested in 2019. That's weird. Then 2 days before he dies, he rewrote his will. I've never heard that story before, but she's got a receipt on that here too from VI courts. Okay, from the Virgin Island courts. Everything he left over after his debts and fees were paid goes into something called the 1953 Trust. I'm guessing that's the year he was born, but I could be wrong. Maybe his parents. Somebody knows. And distributed among more than 40 people. 2 of those people set to get those assets were his brand new executors, Darren K. Indyke and Richard D. Kahn. It also included his brother, Mark Epstein, and his girlfriend, Karina Shuliak. Not Ghislaine Maxwell. His girlfriend, when he died, wasn't Ghislaine. He was with Karina. Now, she needs you to stay with her because this part is important. In this new will, he added a clause that allowed his new executors to sell off assets if necessary to cover environmental fees. Remember, just 2 weeks earlier, the EPA had visited the island, and then suddenly this clause gets added, among other changes, that made sure every single person who needed to get paid would get paid when he died. Then he died 48 hours later. Can anybody challenge that will to that change of the will? The probate laying out how Epstein's estate would be distributed because he was deceased was submitted and processed at the exact same time as his brand new final will. There's something that sets off alarm bells knowing they prepared these around the same time. So what was the plan for Great St. James? In 2016, Epstein paid $22.5 million, as she said, for the 165-acre island. He already owned nearby Little St. James, the property he publicly claimed as his primary residence. Great St. James was just an expansion of his compound. The island was purchased through that shell company called Great St. Jim, LLC, Jim being short for James, and the listed owner was a man named Sultan Ahmed Ben Sulayem. Ben Sulayem claimed that he never gave permission for Jeffrey to do this, and this was done without his knowledge. However, we all know that that's a blatant lie. He was named as a co-conspirator in the child sex trafficking ring led by Epstein's latest release of the files in February. All right. He hasn't been criminally charged, despite telling Epstein how much he enjoyed a video of a child being tortured. Suliem's only punishment is that he resigned from his high-paying executive positions at DP World and due to his association with Epstein. This is from the files. But back in 2016, the deal to purchase the island almost fell apart before it closed because local islanders begged the sellers not to go through with it. The seller's wife later admitted that rumors about Epstein's behavior were allegedly circulating at the time. None of it stopped the transaction, obviously. 3 months after taking ownership, construction crews were on the ground. The plans described a self-sustaining residential and educational compound with a private road network, guest cottages, a barge dock, an amphitheater. What does he need an amphitheater for? A solar array, and even an underwater office and a pool. What does he need an underwater office for? I'm guessing maybe he was planning on having massive parties, being able to entertain at an amphitheater, and having some famous celebrity perform at the amphitheater for all of his guests. The applications also made environmental promises, pledging to protect a rare tree boa and guaranteeing public access to a beloved local spot called Christmas Cove. This is a famous stop on cruise lines, and if you've ever taken a cruise in the area, you may have even stopped there. Oh my God. Can you imagine? We'll be stopping on Epstein Island now. Enjoy your stay. Try not to get raped. Epstein shut Christmas Cove down after taking control, by the way. Of course he did. When he died, an affidavit confirmed that he owned Great St. James. But Great St. James was only one piece of a larger pattern. Documents released by the U.S. Justice Department show that the Virgin Islands government also considered selling Dog Island to Epstein for $1.1 million. Shit, I'd buy it for that. The broader document tranche, numbering in the millions of pages, includes appraisals, property records, and the correspondence detailing Epstein's efforts to expand his footprint in the area. Why? For what purposes other than trafficking, imprisoning, eugenics, and doing it all completely in secret and outside of anybody's view? That looks like a golf course right there. Former Virgin Islands Governor Kenneth Mapp once asked Epstein whether he'd consider letting the government borrow $275 million. A 2012 report by New Grange Consulting Group recommended that Epstein purchase Gordon Ackley's radio station there and the Virgin Islands Daily News in order to influence the 2014 territorial elections and build a media enterprise capable of shaping future political outcomes in the area. Larry Ellison come to mind at all. Unreal. They were already talking about buying outlets to shape and influence territorial elections in 2014. It makes a lot of sense given his affiliation to Trump, who did exactly that. Built Truth Social. Again, there's Christmas Cove, where all the cruise ships used to dock. There's Little St. James Island, and in relation to Great St. James, and allegedly he was having tunnels built between them. When Epstein died, the islands were auctioned off just as his estate had planned. In March 2022, Great St. James and Little St. James were listed together $1 million. Not many people can afford to buy that. Epstein's estate said that the proceeds would go towards settling lawsuits. But by 2023, both islands were sold for half that, $60 million. The billionaire private equity executive Stephen Deckoff, who stated he plans to turn them, like she said, into luxury resorts. Think about what that actually means. Children were trafficked to these islands. Kids were abused and raped on this land. Sounds like Gaza. And the ending to that story is that a billionaire snaps up the property at a discount, slaps some overwater bungalows on it, and starts selling weekend getaways to wealthy tourists. There is no memorial and no reckoning with what happened there. The market just absorbed it, the way it absorbs everything. And the place where some of the worst crimes imaginable were committed is now being rebranded into something you might see in a travel magazine. They might as well call it New Gaza. Sure, to some of you it might just be land, but how can someone really enjoy a water slide and fair food with your kid knowing someone else's child was assaulted and tortured there? It's that they don't know. So, this is where we part for now. Jeffrey Epstein was part of something bigger. A system that has architects, financiers, and protectors at every level. And the timeline surrounding his death makes that impossible to ignore and question whether he's actually even dead. The rewritten will, the probate filing, the EPA visit, the environmental change, a clause that added 48 hours before he died, none of that is coincidence. And the islands are only part of the story. What she's laid out here is only a fraction of what she's actually found. There are threads that go much deeper, and she's not done pulling on them. Next up is Zoro Ranch, the property none of the federal agencies ever bothered to investigate before it was sold off to Don Huffines. The one with testimony, with tips about buried bodies, and not a single FBI inquiry to show for it. Of course, our FBI director is too busy partying over in Italy with the hockey team at the Olympics. That's where she's going next, and I think you'll want to follow along for that one. And I agree, you will. And she's actually even published it, and she made a new little logo or banner for her Substack there, which is really nice. DescentInBloom.substack.com. The other article, which again I'm not going to show or read tonight because we got a bunch more to get to. New Mexico wants answers about Zoro Ranch, and here's what they'll find. So if you want to know, by the way, these are all free to read, 100% free. All right. Support independent media, subscribe, and become a paid subscriber for $5 a month because it goes directly to her and it's helping her pay her bills. And it actually does make a big difference. All right. And by all means, please read this article. Very important. And hours and hours and hours of research. As she says here in chat, I stay up to like 3 a.m. writing sometimes. I don't like using grammar checkers. Leave me alone. It's okay. That's okay. I'll fill in the grammar. The content is what's unbelievable. And no, you've seen nothing, bro. You haven't seen this one before. You have not seen this one before. All right. So again, DescentInBloom.substack.com. Go follow her over there and subscribe. Subscribe, as Reef likes to play that sound bit, but I don't have that on my soundboard. Okay. We've got a couple of ICE stories. We got a lightning round, GoFundMe. So buckle up. We got a few more things to do, and then we'll get out of here for the night. Okay. We're going to talk about what's going on with ICE. All right. Unicorn Riot is another. Oh, before we do that, support independent media. We need it more than ever, just so I can put this when I clip it. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. PayPal.me/Indie News Network. Patreon.com/Indie News Network. Over at IndieNewsNow.com and at INNNewsletter.com. Also at IndieMediaToday.com. Right. Shane is pointing out that the password to Epstein's bank account was changed after his death, which would be Zoro is the better of the two articles. Okay, maybe. It was also the longer of the two articles, and that one was long enough. But that's fair. And again, I'm also giving people a reason to want to go read the other one on their own as well. So we need to do that. Unicorn Riot wrote an article about what's going on in Minnesota because that's where they're from. All right. And this one is infuriating, and it includes a statement that I'm not going, I guess I'll read it. It's not that long. Okay. Nikos Georgiadis, okay, independent media, Indie Media Award honoree Unicorn Riot. Upwards of 206 U.S. citizens have been hauled off the streets into vehicles by mass federal agents conducting Operation Metro Surge over the past 3 months in Minnesota alone, according to legal sources. Many of these citizens, or USCs, have been beaten, had their constitutional rights violated, and were brought to the Whipple Federal Building, some later brought to Shelburne County Jail. One of the hundreds shared their story with Unicorn Riot on condition of anonymity for fear of repression and retribution, and we're publishing their statement. They shared how they were violently detained by ICE near Carmel Mall in South Minneapolis during the infamous incident on December 15th that featured ICE agents dragging a handcuffed woman through the snow and street while getting pelted with snowballs. Because of the large crowd that surrounded two agents, the woman was able to get free. In the anonymous observer's statement printed below, they reflected on their experience. They said comparing the treatment they received to the way immigrants were treated within the detention centers illustrates the broader systematic harm faced by immigrants, indigenous people, and communities of color. They urged people not to normalize ICE's presence as it escalates fear, violence, and community disruption. 2 months after their arrest and charges of assaulting a federal agent, their criminal complaint was dismissed with prejudice by U.S. District Judge Donovan Frank because the government failed to file an indictment within 30 days of arrest. They don't care. They just want to detain you, screw with you, and let you go. More than 20 others are facing federal felonies for impeding or similar offenses while observing federal agents. 9 others, including journalist Georgia Fort, are facing charges for a protest at a church where acting St. Paul ICE field director David Easterwood is a pastor. And here is the statement. Quote, while driving towards Carmel Mall after an immigration abduction by ICE, the car in front of me stopped and 2 agents exited the vehicle and approached mine. They came to both sides of the vehicle and told me to put the vehicle in park and pulled their guns on me. They held the gun in my face and shouted at me to put the vehicle in park. One reached in and put my vehicle in park. They pulled me from the vehicle. They shouted, reaching for something? Reaching for something, and continued to shout at me, weapons drawn, then cuffed me and lifted me into their vehicle. Several Minneapolis Police Department officers stood by and watched. I realize now, after the murder of Alex Preddy, that I'm lucky to be alive. One of the 2 ICE agents had gotten OC spray in his eyes at the abduction. He was so deeply affected that he was unable to drive and had to exit the car to switch places with the second officer so that the vehicle could even be driven safely. You drive. I can't see, too much OC. His eyes were watery. He seemed very much on edge, talking fast, worried and anxious. He was crying and wiping his face and whining about the pain it was causing him. As he complained several times over the drive, I said, maybe you shouldn't have sprayed so much then. Eventually, they shackled me to the chair in front of me. As the agents calmed down from this interaction, they read me my Miranda rights. Next to me sat a man whose English was not sufficient to understand the rights being read to him, so I asked if they would be reading him his Miranda rights in Spanish. One agent spoke over the phone to someone saying, we got to go back there. Is everyone out? We drove past 29th and Pillsbury one more time on our way to Whipple. He said over the phone, I got 1 USC and 1 illegal alien, so we got 2 and 2. USC implies U.S. citizen. This seemed to imply there was no in between, or that to ICE, it doesn't matter if someone has an active asylum case, is seeking naturalization, or is on a valid work visa. Regardless of someone's legality of residing and working in the U.S., ICE was applying a binary citizen versus illegal alien, At no point prior to booking did they verify anything regarding my documentation or legality to work and reside in the United States. They made assumptions of legal versus illegal based on our clothing, the color of our skin, and our accents. I'm light-skinned, without an accent, and speak English well. And the other detainee was darker-skinned, presumably Latin, and he spoke Spanish better than English. The man next to me had been sitting in his car behind ICE with his girlfriend during the chaotic scene at 29th and Pillsbury, when the agent went up to his window, shouted something, and without much time or hesitation, an agent shattered the window with a device. We've heard countless stories about this. He reached his hand in the broken window, opened the car door, and pulled the man out. His girlfriend was also taken from the car later on. I asked him some questions in Spanish, and the agents asked me, "Are you a professional? How much are you getting paid for this?" Like, heaven forbid you were just a human and knew Spanish and wanted to help somebody in need. I asked the man if he had a lawyer and told him not to speak to them unless he spoke to his lawyer. The agent who couldn't drive complained about the broken glass causing his hand to bleed. The agents periodically expressed frustration when I would speak in Spanish to them. "Why don't you speak in English? You know English. Speak English." I asked the agents if they knew why someone might refuse to comply with an order. They seemed very excited at that question, saying, "Tell me," and presumably beginning a recording on their phone. They thought that I was intending to incriminate myself. I did comply with all orders received during my arrest. I said that if the orders are given in English and someone only speaks Spanish, it's reasonable to believe that people might not understand the order and might not comply. We arrived at Whipple. After a while, a federal agent came to my side door and said, "Give us your name," and expressing that it would be bad for me if I didn't. They opened the hatchback so the agent, who couldn't drive, could get his own OC off himself and wipe his bloody hand. While performing the abductions amid the crowd, they had looked worried and disoriented. Yet as the ICE agents gathered outside the vehicle, they were seen patting each other on the back, offering each other food, laughing and smiling and joking. It was unclear if they really liked the violence and chaos of abductions, or if they were just attempting to look cool in front of other agents. I caught some bits and pieces of conversations from the back of the vehicle, such as, "Don't talk near this one of them speaks English," and "I got 44 and I just need 6 more. One agent said, "I'm ready to go back now. Let's go back. That place is really a hot spot." I was eventually removed from the vehicle, and they took a bottle of water and poured it into my hair, down the front of my face, saying, "We have to do this," regarding the pepper spray. It was incredibly ineffective and seemed like it was only done to get pepper spray into my eyes and face from my hair. They laughed as I sputtered from the water covering my nose and mouth. The agent bent my wrist in on itself and pushed me toward a garage. I said, "Is this necessary for you to be hurting my wrist?" He said, "This is what they're supposed to do. Standard procedure." My wrists have scars and still hurt from the cuffs and the forceful mishandling. I was brought down a corridor from the garage into a holding room at Whipple. There were 2 or 3 folks that were Spanish speakers who were in the room with us the whole time who worked at Whipple. When I asked what they did here, they said they were there to clean. There were too many federal agents and Whipple building employees going in and out. There were 2 men in the corner sorting property and counting money. On the ground directly in front of us was the wrap, a full-body detention straitjacket device. We all sat on a bench, me and 4 men who were presumed by ICE to be undocumented. I could tell by the difference in how we were treated. Presumed undocumented people were sort of ignored or disregarded in a way that I wasn't. They were all dark-skinned Latino folks. I recall now hearing from friends in immigrant and Native communities, learning that ICE frequently was targeting darker-skinned people, making assumptions of people's ethnicity and citizenship. So I began speaking to some of the folks. One had been doing his laundry at the laundromat when he was approached entering his car, and apparently at some point, someone's arm was caught in the car door. He worked as a dishwasher at a restaurant He said that the ICE agent who arrested him was feo, muy feo, which is ugly. The man who I was in the car with was asking for his girlfriend as we were being segregated by sex. I spoke with one ICE agent who I think did not like that I was asking him why he was doing this job. And I told him that I do things in the community such as feed homeless people and that we treat people right in Minnesota. What happened to Southern hospitality, I asked. I said something about Minnesota nice. He replied that I should come down to Texas, unclear if that was a threat, and that he was just running around all day trying to find an ATM so he could give his $100 per diem to a homeless person. He seemed to pose a question. This is a question to me in a way of, see, we're not all bad people. We're actually doing what's right. I said, people are complicated. I overheard an agent who was struggling to count money talking with an ERO agent in his friend's group chat. I offered to help him count money since he seemed to be having such trouble counting it multiple times. He was lamenting about how the group chat was just supposed to be fun memes and fart jokes and no religion, no politics. She was commiserating with him about the difficulty of facing backlash for working as an immigration agent. He said that one of his friends sent the message and that his wife told him don't even read it. And so I'm not going to read it. He seemed to be implying that the message was something critical of him or the work he was doing, and that seemed to be troubling him. I asked how long this was going to take, and he looked up and joked, "Hey, you hear that? They're disappointed with the service. You can leave us a review." Fucking assholes. He told a story of another ICE agent who would give detainees a feedback form for evaluation of the detention process, and that he would turn all these forms in periodically as a fun joke to his supervisor. I started to get on his nerves, perhaps, as I was singing something in Spanish. One of the agents said, "This is America, why don't you speak English?" He also said, "You're corny, you know that. And you think they want to hear you singing in Spanish right now? I know exactly what you people sing about. Gringo, Corazon, and all that liberation bullshit." He mentioned being a Buddhist and meditating. I offered some retorts, which I do not recall, perhaps asking him if he feels like he can sleep at night doing his job, abducting people. He approached me and wanting to have a little argument about how it's not an abduction. "Ask him if I was compassionate," he said, referring to the dishwasher. "Ask him how compassionate I was. I'm compassionate." He seemed to find it funny that the dishwasher was otherwise disposed getting his property receipt and wasn't talking with me, saying, "He won't even give you the time of day. He doesn't care about you. You're so corny." Eventually, when the man who worked as a dishwasher had a moment, I asked the question that the agent wanted me to pose to him, and he laughed at the absurdity. I told the agent that he found him ugly, and that sort of ended the conversation. At one point, someone entered the room and said, "What's up, guys?" And when I replied, "Que paso?" he muttered, "Disgusting," and left immediately. Some building staff were discussing eating Somali food and other ethnic restaurants in Minneapolis. I said, "How could you be talking about trying the food when you're basically working for ICE?" They all seemed miffed by that, saying, "What are you talking about, ICE? We're talking about food. What does ICE have to do with food?" Eventually, they came to remove me from the holding area, and the agent who I'd had the extended conversation with shouted over to me that I should try meditation. I told him I have no deeds that I need peace from. I was taken to a holding cell. I was not yet given water, and I'm not sure there was toilet paper, so I asked repeatedly for water, a lawyer, and toilet paper, and/or an understanding of how much time it would be before water and toilet paper would be given. I was still covered in pepper spray, and I couldn't touch my hair or my eyes. The building staff and/or ICE agents threatened me with being placed in a padded room if I didn't cease asking for a lawyer. I was singing a lot and making trumpet noises to pass the time and persisted in being a nuisance until my needs were met. I sang Joseph's "Close Every Door" and Phantom's "Let Me Be Your Shelter" and Music of the Night and Aladdin's "A Whole New World." My captors would periodically tell me to shut up, and then someone would come on an indefinite timeline. Someone would come on an indefinite timeline when they get here. Eventually, they stopped answering my questions over the comm box. someone pushed the door closed despite my foot being in the doorway. I'm not sure how much time passed. As Homeland Security Investigations agent came to my door, all right, and said that they would like to interview me. I refused the interview and said I would like to speak with a lawyer now. They said that not now, but later, and returned me to the cell. All right. Eventually, Homeland Security returned, and I was able to get on the phone with someone. Hours later, without warning or explanation, I was taken from the holding cell, and 2 Homeland Security agents transported me in a vehicle to Sherburne County. That's the jail. They didn't let me out to pee, and I had no knowledge I was about to take an hour-long drive, so I peed in their vehicle while awaiting entrance to Sherburne. The Homeland Security agents conferred me into the custody of Sherburne County and told me they would come back to pick me up in the morning. When they heard what medications I required, they assumed I was trans and asked me if I wanted a woman to pat me down. I said that I just didn't want them to grope me and to use the back of the hand. I don't think they understood what I meant, as they proceeded to pat me down open-palmed, running their hands across my chest. Women are usually patted down with the backside of the hand. I was put in a new holding cell. I sang lots of songs, and I could hear the folks in other cells singing with me. Okay, at one point I said I would take requests, and a detainee asked for Grenade by Bruno Mars. I sang Grenade and I'm gonna leave the door open, which was apt considering it was coincided with a nurse opening my door to check vitals. Lion King's I Just Can't Wait to Be Free, and my fellow inmates sang along to Change Is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. The pepper spray was becoming quite painful. Officers at Sherburne were slightly more attentive when I needed water, etc. I was given a bologna sandwich, which I can't eat. I was strip searched and told to show my armpits and turn and cough with my bare ass bared naked by male COs. All right, that's corrections officers. I asked for a shower several times and was denied. After repeated requests for a shower, I was told late into the night, Big Boss says no. So I began screaming, moaning, making as much unpleasant noise as possible. I got a shower relatively quickly after that, in super hot water, which of course is not recommended for pepper spray, which was very painful, but better than the alternative of no shower at all. My whole body was on fire for about a half hour after that, and I still had pepper spray on my hands and hair days later, but my condition improved in general. I was finally moved into housing at 2 a.m. and was kept in maximum security for about 30-ish hours. I thought they were coming to get him the next day. The inmates there were very nice and kind and helpful. I never received a meal that didn't have meat and asked the corrections officers to give the meat and dairy products to other people. They always took the milk back, but did allow me to give away the meat. I asked for a book, but one of the other max security folks said all the books sucked. I was eventually able to get time to call friends, attorneys, and family. I played cribbage with myself, using the holes in the grate at the back of my cell with broken pencils and pegs, and with a handmade deck of cards. I drew fake windows, and within the windows, a lake scene with a dock and a beaver and a tree line. I was in detention at Sherburne for about 30 hours, despite, again, the Homeland Security agents telling me that they would be back in the morning to bring me to the U.S. Marshals. When they arrived to pick me up, they also attempted to fingerprint me in a booking room. In the booking room, there was a swastika on the wall and an SS, which I asked if they would remove. They said, someone will come to clean it. When I received a wipe to clean my hands for the fingerprinting ink, I used it to clean the hate symbols off the wall. I told them I would bill them later for the cleaning. This time, before leaving, they took care to ask if I needed to use the restroom. They then transferred me to the custody of U.S. Marshals. I was fingerprinted 2 to 3 more times, photographed 2 to 3 more times, and body scanned once over the course of my experience. I was released a few hours later. While in holding at the U.S. Marshals, I made conversation with a man from Red Lake who said that ICE had been active on the reservation abducting natives. I write this now knowing that 3 Lakota men had been detained indefinitely by ICE, merely for being brown, unhoused, and like many folks unhoused, lacking readily documentation and legal rights. I write this knowing that the fear and danger that ICE poses to me is nothing compared to what is being faced by individuals in the indigenous, Hispanic, Somali, and Southeast Asian communities. I write this in the wake of the murders of Keith Porter and Victor Manuel Diaz, Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, and many others. I write this in the wake of the murder of Renee Good by Jonathan Ross, despite her attempt to escape, despite the fact that she posed no threat. After he shot her, he called her a fucking bitch. She's been branded a domestic terrorist by the head of DHS, much like I'm sure they will brand me and other legal observers. Much like they branded Alex Preddy. Much like they brand the entire trans community as being, quote, narcissistic, violent extremists. I write this hoping you understand ICE for what it is, an existential threat to our way of life. ICE rips families apart and irreparably damages the fabric of the immigrant communities that make America great. The front doors of businesses are locked. The public gatherings and dances in our immigrant communities have ceased or occur in secret. Children are being sent off to Texas. And the taco trucks have disappeared from Lake Street. ICE agents will shoot our press, tase and pepper spray observers, and shoot unarmed observers like Renee, like Preddy, like me. ICE agents say, haven't you learned? Implying that non-compliance is reason enough for execution. If you read this far, I would hope that you would share this account with anyone who supports ICE, with anyone who believes we should just weather the storm or is losing faith. Too often, people's belief in good, our government, leads them to believe that no one could be this cruel. Things could not be this bad, that they're just going after the bad ones, or negative opinions, or just propaganda for the other side. The racism and cruelty are overtly evident to anyone detained or in the streets observing ICE. The intent to intimidate and instigate is overwhelmingly clear. The criticism of ICE agents affects them. Talking about these things with your friends and coworkers helps to combat its normalization. This is not normal. Whether you allow ICE to come into your businesses, your communities, your hotels, your friend groups, will affect the course of history. Don't let them sleep at our hotels, use our bathrooms, fill up their vehicles with our gas, or eat at our restaurants. Because where ICE is welcome, others are not. I hope we all can work together, grab our whistles, and stick up for our neighbors and our rights before they disappear. Again, this is a statement from a U.S. citizen who was arrested by federal agents while observing a violent federal operation in South Minneapolis. The citizen was held for multiple days in federal custody and on February 17th had their felony assault on a federal agent charge dropped by a judge. The views and opinions expressed in this statement don't necessarily represent those of Unicorn Riot. And again, this is the abduction in question where they ripped this lady out of her car. They pointed guns at people. I believe that we actually showed this video, if I remember correctly, at Pillsbury and 29th, which you can clearly see the sign. Oh, there's the video from the arrest. Let's watch that. 37 seconds. She ended up getting away, allegedly. I don't see how. They're kneeling on her back. And so one of the other people arrested that day was this U.S. citizen that gave that statement, who witnessed this. Fuck ICE. Unicorn Riot, again, is an Indie Media Award honoree. inaugural class 2022 for outstanding journalism and being an outstanding outlet. They also did extensive coverage of the Line 3 pipeline protest by indigenous people in Minnesota, as well as the Wiley Forest and the murder of Tortuguita down in Stop Cop City. They were there for all of that. A big fan of Unicorn Riot. There were two other ICE items, one of which, continue without disabling, is that this is somewhat nearby my home, but I learned about this. This is just 49 seconds.
They will be very well-structured detention facilities meeting our regular detention standards.
So what's happening is that in Roxbury, New Jersey, ICE bought a warehouse that all of the town is opposed to. And they're going ahead with the purchase and building it anyway. They don't care.
It should not come as news that ICE will be making arrests in states across the U.S. and is actively working to expand detention space. ICE also says the facility and its construction are expected to bring 1,300 jobs to that area and would contribute $161 million to the local economy. Meanwhile, the Roxbury mayor, Sean Patillo, put out this statement. Let us be clear, Roxbury Township will not passively accept this outcome. The Township Council and our legal team have been preparing to pursue all available legal remedies.
Damn straight. And then you've got statements from other representatives. ICE told the public that it had not purchased a warehouse in Roxbury, and now we learn from the town's mayor and council that the agency has closed on the property and will move forward with a detention warehouse for up to 1,500 people. I hope I don't end up there someday. That kind of bait and switch is unacceptable, especially when it involves policing an ICE detention center in a residential community without any community input. And again, that's Frank Pallone Jr. His dad was also a representative. And then we had a Robert Menendez Jr. His father famously was the disgraced senator. All right, DHS and ICE have repeatedly and maliciously lied to the American public while they continue to relentlessly attack our communities. But we will never relent in our fight for justice and for our neighbors. Again, all these guys are Democrats. Remember, the Democrats also overfunded ICE. So, fuck these guys. All right. Third thing about ICE, and this is a longer article that I'm not going to read tonight because we're already after midnight, but I want everybody to go and take a look at over at Indie Media Award honoree Left Voice. All right. Samuel Carlin, no relation to George, it's Carlin with a K. Don't let the Democrats co-opt the movement against ICE again. All right. Now, this is important. Now, these guys, again, we're anti-duopoly here. We're against all of that. But we are understanding that the duopoly is looking to seize upon a narrative, and they see what's popular, and they see that protesting ICE is popular, and they want to get behind that and co-opt it. So what Sam says here is, in response to growing outrage over Trump's war on immigrants, Democrats are now refusing to fund DHS unless ICE is reformed. It should be abolished. Recent history demonstrates why the Democrats' maneuvering is a dead end for those who want to abolish ICE. All right, so read this article. It's actually a really good one. Not too short, not too long, but again, we're running a little bit long tonight. And again, Left Voice is another Indie Media Award honoree from back in 2022, inaugural class for being an outstanding outlet. They're part of La Izquierda Diario and that whole network, and all of their links again are here at indiemediaawards.substack.com. So fuck ICE. That statement was really heartbreaking, and remember, that's how they treated an American citizen who was just observing, who apparently was also trans and maybe light-skinned but still Latino and spoke Spanish and could communicate with the people in the facility. Shout out to them. Thank you for what you're doing. Is it okay? Yeah, we're still live. Okay. I'm sorry for the dropping of streams. I don't know what the hell's going on tonight. This is crazy. I haven't seen it like this in months and months and months. All right. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. We're going to do a lightning round real quick. But before we do that, Cash App, $, Indie News Network. ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me/Indie News Network, Patreon. We also have patreon.com/Indie News Network. I saw somebody complain, a creator, that they got their Patreon, their Patreon was shut down out of nowhere. So they were being sought by Rumble to, hey, build over here. They can't publish over at Rumble. I mean, you can, I guess, over at Locals, but nobody's really reading over there. Yeah. So also website, IndieNewsNow.com, aggregator with over 100 sources, ad-free, 24/7. Also, you can leave a tip for the network and for me. IndieMediaToday.com. That's my Substack. We're live over there right now. Hi to everybody live watching over there. Beth Tracy just joined. Tempe just joined a little while ago. Hello and welcome to Indie News Now Live. We're still going to talk about a couple of quick stories where I'm just going to show you the headline and read a couple tweets or whatever, and then we'll get to the GoFundMes and the updates on our friends. Okay. Now, this one almost warms my heart, except that it's not a total restoration. A couple of weeks, about 2 months ago, we actually talked about David Rovics, who's a musician that YouTube erased. So YouTube deleted his channel, deleted him from YouTube Music, deleted all of his playlists, deleted everything, unpersoned him. Well, after a major outcry, he said solidarity gets the goods, or at least some of them. They now have decided that they have been reinstated, that his channel has been reinstated. However, not fully. And he wrote this article that explains what's going on here. And I said, this almost warms my heart, except that it's not a total restoration of David's albums to YouTube Music. And he says that in the article. But the injustice is in the process of being corrected, hopefully, and we've seen positive movement in repersoning David, which is good. Sadly, YouTube will suffer no recourse or harm for the real, irreparable damage they've caused without a lawsuit. They just get to say, my bad, bro, and everyone moves on, because this happened 2 months ago from the December 16th episode of Indie News Now Live. I mean, we did it on this show during the lightning round. We talked about Richard Medhurst being sanctioned, all right, having his charges dropped in the UK, and then about David Rovics being silenced by YouTube. Then a couple of weeks ago, I said the school bully just beat up an unassuming student who was only trying to help others. We need to find a way to make YouTube pay for doing stuff like this. Otherwise, they're going to continue to do it. I talked about this again about a month ago. Keep pressing. All right, that was also on this show during the lightning round. So lightning round is becoming the David Rovics round. What's going on with David Rovics? Well, at least he's back on YouTube. Go support David Rovics. That's davidrovics.substack.com. All right. This is the article where he's a partial victory in a campaign to restore my YouTube stuff. And the problem is that not being on YouTube Music, his music isn't being recommended to as many people. So it's not being discovered by as many people that would ordinarily like it and be in that genre. Next, we have a win. We finally got some happy news. A big fuck you to big tech. New Jersey residents defeat the AI data center that was being proposed in New Brunswick. So this comes out of Brett Wilkins and Common Dreams, and then republished over at SheerPost. All three of those are Indie Media Award honorees. So I'm going to hit it 3 times. 1, 2, hey. And then 3. There we go. So, what's happening here is that City of New Brunswick voted Wednesday to cancel plans to construct an AI data center and instead build a new public park where that 27,000 square foot facility would have gone. And there's video. Okay. This is They
canceled it!
Say what?
They canceled it!
This is everybody celebrating outside the town meeting when it got canceled.
The people united will never be defeated! The people united will never be defeated! The people united will never
We are going to be fighting against data centers everywhere in New Jersey. I will see each and every one of you again. And we say a big fuck you to big tech. We say a big fuck you to private equity. And it's time to build communities, not data centers. We're here today because there's a proposed data center popping up here in New Brunswick. There are hundreds of concerned residents showing up. People are fired up. They do not want big tech in their community. They do not want these data centers popping up in black and brown majority neighborhoods. It is done like that for a reason. These billionaires and financiers at AMZAC Capital Management know exactly what they're doing because they are doing it everywhere. So we are asking the city council tonight to do the fucking right thing and stop this data center from moving forward. No! Data center! No! Data center! No! Data center! Energy rates have gone up by 20 to 30%. 70% of that is being caused by data centers built in the PJM region, okay? Water bills, right? New Brunswick residents know water bills doubled in 2025 to handle the infrastructure. It's gonna go up another $10 on water and sewer this year. So this project is gonna raise bills for your energy and for your water. We fired up?
Hell yeah.
People united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.
Nitro. Doc Nitro, good for you. Welcome to the stream. All right, following the council meeting, jubilant residents celebrated the data center's cancellation. All right, we say a big fuck you to big tech. I fucking love Ben Zobiak. All right, hero. I want to have that guy on. I want to talk to him. He's as loud as can be, and he's filthy, and I love it. And fuck it. And I love him using the word fuck out there and screaming it. Again, as I mentioned before, Indie Media Award honorees over Brett Wilkins, who wrote the article, okay, for Common Dreams, that is also an outlet that does outstanding work, though they do simp for Democrats at times, and they are hopeful that AOC and the squad will still be good, and I can't believe that, but I guess that's where their audience is. And then, of course, SheerPost is also an outstanding outlet. Both of them were first ballot Hall of Fame class of 2022. Actually, all three of them from 2022. All right. Finally, we've got another anti-war Dave DeCamp article, which is that why are we still bombing Somalia? All right. 36th airstrike of the year on Somalia on February 19th. Why? It makes no sense. AFRICOM said in a press release Friday night that its forces launched another airstrike in Somalia as the Trump admin continues its record-breaking bombing campaign in the country. They're not even using justification. They literally offer no other details about the strike. And there have been no statements from the U.S.-backed Somali government about military operations in the area that day. Like, this is being used, in my opinion, to then justify war against Somalia and targeting Somalians here and war against Somalia because they're going to want Somalia and Somaliland, quote unquote, to take the remaining Palestinians that they have not murdered or displaced. And that's the goal. And people in Somaliland have already agreed to do that. So go follow Dave DeCamp over at antiwar.com. News.antiwar.com is where all of his stuff is. Again, here's Dave's card. Again, he was a 2022 honoree. Actually, I think he was 23. Class of 23. And again, there's his podcast. And he's got a daily YouTube show called Anti-War News with Dave DeCamp. That's also on Rumble. That's also on Odyssey. That's also on Substack. Go follow Dave DeCamp at Anti-War. There he is on Spotify. And there's all the stuff at antiwar.com. All right. That was our lightning round. I know we're running long. Support independent media. We need it more than ever. You know the ways to do it. Cash App, Ko-fi, PayPal, Patreon, over at Substacks, and at website IndieNewsNow.com. See them all up there on screen. Anything you can do to support and help us pay the bills, keep the lights on, really appreciate. All right. Impressive guy. Yes, Dave DeCamp is an impressive guy. Impressive as hell. Okay, finally, we're going to get to our GoFundMes. And we talk about our friends in need all the time, every week. We use our platform every week to showcase GoFundMes from people that could use some help. We've been talking about Shanda Masta now for 18 months since she was diagnosed with small cell lung cancer. She's gone through 3 rounds of treatment, including 78 zaps to the head on her latest radiation experimental through Fred Hutch in Seattle. Thank you so much to Amber King for taking such good care of her. On February 22nd, just 3 days ago, she finally made it home after 2 months of hospital stays. That's a good thing, a very good thing. And I also wanted to mention this video, and I'll pause this for a second. We'll play it. She says, "Bang the gong. Wow, what a year it's already been." And she's got a whole health update here, okay, about how she's now rung the bell and she's done with her treatment. Started a new immunotherapy treatment. Again, you can read the whole thing. I'm not going to go through and read it. It's a little long, but I want to play her ringing the gong, which is what cancer patients do after they finish their treatments and they've completed that milestone. I'm proud of her and I love her. Just fuck cancer.
87 times on the radiation table.
87.
87 times.
Fuck cancer, man. So Shanda's GoFundMe is here. She's up to almost 10,000. Their goal is 18,000. Anything you can do to support her, we really appreciate. She's 51 years old. It saddens me and frightens me that someone this young could get this. Remember, this is our friend Shanda from 2023, Roar Media, Beauty and the Boomer, Trailer Park Pundit, the hell and back. I mean, she's been alongside us for years, and we want to make sure she stays alongside us for years. And we've been fighting alongside her, and she needs money to help live and continue to pay the bills while she gets healthy and gets treatment and hopefully gets a little bit better and learns to live with this. So again, Shanda Masta. This is indiemediaawards.substack.com. But again, I dropped her GoFundMe link in the chat for everyone that if you can give a couple bucks, she could really use it. Sadly, she's not the only one. Also in the chat tonight is Cowboy Kitty. His sister-in-law last summer was stopped, a routine traffic stop for registration check by cops, and ended up in an ICE detention facility and is still there to this day. And it's really heartbreaking and it's a waste. Like, what was she doing in there? She wasn't hurting anybody. She could have been productive and earning while going through all of this. But no, they had to lock her up. Punishment is the process, and the state is getting money and ICE is getting money from the government to keep her locked up. They have scheduled. They ruled that she should be deported. She's appealing that ruling. She's locked up pending appeal. The appeal was supposed to be on Friday. It then was postponed until Monday. Again, I'm still waiting to hear if Cowboy Kitty is here in the chat and he can share with us what the latest is from the ICE hearing. Chris H., from what you hear, ICE agents are still not done in Minnesota. Correct, as from what I've heard too. All right. It's really frustrating that we can't get due process. Oh, and here we go, Cowboy Kitty. I don't even know what's going on right now. So that's, again, there was supposed to be a hearing postponed that was from Friday until Monday, and we're still waiting for word to find out if she's even still here or was put on a plane. I'm guessing that they would tell somebody if they put her on a plane and send her back to Ukraine. But sometimes we don't find out until they're already back there and they're able to then contact their family here. So fuck ICE for that too. All right. And then, so that is Natalia's GoFundMe. She's over 2,200. So thank you to everyone who's been able to support and throw a couple of bucks their way. You know, it's been really hard. I'm sure while she's locked up in order to pay bills, and I know they used a little bit of money to pay a lawyer, and they used some money to pay to take care of her daughter, who I think is in high school. And then we've got Justice for Aspen. We've been talking about Justice for Aspen for too long as well. We did a fundraiser live stream for her in October after Dissent and Bloom wrote a beautiful article detailing exactly what happened to Aspen. That's right here. She was starved, neglected, and degraded. She held her humanity. In a lot of cases, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities and parallels to this American citizen that was detained in the Whipple building in Minnesota by ICE as to how they were treated. And we don't want to see Aspen. Aspen is facing decades in prison potentially for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a passenger in a vehicle that was stopped. It was pulled over. Cops searched the vehicle, found massive quantities of drugs to the level that they could charge everyone in the vehicle with drug trafficking, completely unbeknownst to her that there was anything in the vehicle or that the person driving it was a trafficker. And the person driving it had told the cops she doesn't know anything, you know, let her go, whatever. They weren't going to do that. She was already in jail 15 days. Her mother raised bail. We've already helped raise some money, a little over $12,000, but we now need to raise that to another level. And she's going to need tens of thousands more for experts and lawyers and rent while all this is happening. Because of course she can't work. She was trying to go to school for criminal justice. All of that goes out the window if she's convicted and is held up while she's pending trial. So please support Aspen if you can as well. Aspen and her mother, Halo Benson, are Assange supporters and defenders of free speech and truth, and they were organizers for Oklahoma for Assange, and they had been there when Gabriel Shipton and John Shipton did the preview of their home run tour for Assange and the preview of the Ithaca movie documentary that they had produced. Okay, these are people who would be in the streets, but now they're being tied up with a lawsuit, and it's just heartbreaking. And then finally, again, we have the IndieNewsNow website. I've talked about it at all the breaks between articles and between segments. It's an ad-free website that runs 24/7 and aggregates news from more than 100 sources, Israel-Palestine news, and antiwar.com, and Odyssey video pages. Okay, and then we got Caitlin Johnstone and The Dissident and Left Voice and our friend A Skeptic. And like I said, antiwar.com, Chris Hedges articles, and all of these link to the original. All right, we're not actually trying to capture the content and keep you here. We want to actually get you to the best content out there and give them the traffic so that you subscribe to their sites and support their sources. But while you're here, pick up some merch. We've got a link to merch. I'm actually wearing an Indie News Now live t-shirt that I got sent to me by the wonderful members at our Big Frog store. And I'm going to show you where that shirt is, down towards the bottom. It's one of the newer shirts. I got a Boat Smashing Into Other Boats shirt sent to me. I got an Indie Media Today, and there's an Indie News Now live shirt as well with the red at the bottom. And I got, of course, the Indie logo shirt. I'm wearing that one tomorrow. It's finally out of the wash, and I can't wait. Can't wait to wear that one. They're comfortable. They're good sized. Pick them up at the Indie News shop. Yeah, we support independent media because who else is giving you these stories from these angles and reading these witness statements? Not enough of us. All right, Cowboy Kitty. All right, thank you. We appreciate it so much. It was $1,100 for the appeal, $700 to her daughter, $200 on Friday, holding on to the rest till we know what's happening. That's understand, man. Look, this is for you to do with what you need to do with for her and for them. Thank you for organizing it and for being a voice for her, because otherwise she's got nobody. And think about the number of people that are sitting in facilities that don't have a cowboy kitty that's going on a YouTube show in the chat and talking about it and getting people to write articles and help raise money about it. Because Dissent and Bloom also wrote a beautiful article about Natalia's story. All right, man. I'm a little wiped out. This has been a long night. I appreciate everybody bearing with us through all the dropped streams and through all the difficult articles that we read. I love you all, and this is why I do it, is because I create the media I think that we want to see. So please share this if you agree, and tell more people about it. And like I say every week, support independent media because we need it more than ever. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want?